All right, everyone. I'm going to get us live on LinkedIn, and then we are going to be ready to roll.
Woohoo!
Yeah. We got a couple seconds here.
Happy Friday.
All right, everyone. As Curt would say, just said, happy Friday. I'm back again with the Manufacturing Ecommerce Success Series. I'm your co-host, Damon Postolka. I've got Curt Anderson up there just to my right. Let's see. Yes, my right. I keep getting mixed up looking in the cameras. And I'm going to let you take it from here, Curt, so you can introduce our guest of the day and we can get going.
Dude, thank you. So welcome everybody every week. You know, Damon, we are just blessed with like A-listers week in and week out. And this week is no different. I'm going to give a shout out to everybody joining us today. We've got Lissa up in Alaska. We've got Leo. We've got Val, AJ, Kevin. So thank you guys, everybody on LinkedIn. Thank you for joining us. And people will be popping in here as we continue. Today, our guest is man, Damon, this is phenomenal. I'm going to be here for a minute or two. No, I'm just kidding. So we have a supply chain expert, and she's such an expert. Her name is the supply chain queen. We have Sheri Hinish. Sheri, thank you for joining us today. I know you're super busy. What an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's cover a few things that you have going on. First off, when guys, I dropped her LinkedIn profile in the chat box, and as every week, drop your LinkedIn profile in there. We'd love to hear where you're coming from. Connect with Sheri on LinkedIn. Connect with each other. Bobby in Seattle, thanks for joining us. So, Sheri, I noticed that you have multiple degrees. Can you please talk about that? Like, how many degrees does one person have?
I have a lot of degrees. So it's interesting because I don't have a traditional career path in supply chain. I sort of landed in supply chain, I think like many of us, as a third or fourth career, but I fell in love with it immediately. So my undergraduate degree is in business with a minor in supply chain. I have a master's in supply chain management from Rutgers, also a master's in sustainability and supply chain innovation from Harvard. And then I did some post-grad work at Cornell in human behavior. And I also have a lot of certifications, PMP, Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, design thinking certification, and leading sustainable transformation. So a lot of degrees.
Wow.
But I'm always a student. I'm always learning.
Well, man, I feel like a huge underachiever right now.
Yeah, I know. I just got this wave of you've done nothing.
No,
it's cool. Sorry.
Very impressive Ivy League background. This is just phenomenal, and you're such an inspiration with what you've done in diversity and supply chain. We're going to dig into that now. I also, you know, you've earned and gained a tremendous respect from your peers. You have, if you go to Sheri's LinkedIn profile, numerous awards. Can you talk, you know, like 2020 Global Women Supply Leader, 2021 Top 100 Women Supply Chain, Pros to Know. Seems like, you know, every year you're earning that award. Talk a little bit about some of the awards. Feel comfortable bragging a little bit, please.
I don't feel comfortable bragging, but you know what it is? I think I fell in love with supply chain, and I have this amazing opportunity where what I want to be when I grow up and my passion to change the world have somehow aligned, and I get paid for it. So I think, you know, when you start out in this field, at least for me, you know, it was a means to an end where I was getting a paycheck and kind of struggling through what do I want to do next. And then at some point it started clicking, and I realized, hey, there's a real opportunity to make an impact. And when you talk about, you know, supply chain or STEM through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, when you start hearing from some underrepresented groups and women and other folks in the domain who don't feel like they have a voice, and they say, you've inspired me to push myself and to pursue a career in supply chain. I mean, how can you not stand up and evangelize the great work that these folks are doing? So I think a lot of the awards, I didn't focus on that. It just sort of became a byproduct of that process of impact and continuous improvement and pushing myself to add value to myself and to others in the world that we share.
Right. And I appreciate your humility, and I think it's just a testament of your passion, your expertise, and just being a champion in the industry and just really paving a path for other women. We share a friend with DC Mans Stragola, and she was a guest of ours several months ago. And so I know she's in supply chain as well. Talk a little bit about, so you're with IBM and great title, global leader in sustainability and in supply chain. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing with all the changes with, the world that we're in today with COVID and everything that's gone on in your life the past year.
Sure. So again, sustainable supply chain is really my jam. That's where I live, and also at the intersection of technology. So when you think about the environmental and social emergencies happening right now, we don't have to enumerate them, but climate change, collapse of biodiversity, our oceans, the human health crisis with COVID, and also the fact that there are over 4 billion people that are living on less than $5 a day. The digital divide, where people don't have access to the internet, for example. Supply chains touch all of this. And I was pulled to supply chain and then subsequently IBM, because I believe that intersection of sustainability, supply chain, and technology has the power to save the world. And, some folks might say, well, why supply chain? 50 to 85% of those sustainability impacts, this is through the lens of planet and people, they actually happen in the supply chain. So when you think about that end-to-end view for change in addressing a lot of the complex problems that we have in the world right now, it happens in supply chain. And I think just to add another layer, supply chains with purpose. I talk a lot about purpose. That's really the North Star, and having a shared vision like the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which we're going to get into, I think, today. That's really this, beautiful roadmap that encapsulates what the future could be for everyone, leaving no one behind. And that's what I do at IBM. I wake up with purpose, wanting to make a better world for my kids and your kids, and really being proud of a world that's responsible and that's equitable.
Wow.
Yeah, very cool.
That was that was phenomenal. So Sheri, for supply chain, our show is manufacturers. We're relentlessly trying to help manufacturers get into e-commerce. You're working relentlessly on supply chain. What are you seeing as far as like e-commerce with like your clients, or are you seeing improvements or changes? Did COVID inspire folks to get deeper in e-commerce that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I am. Obviously, there's been a tremendous uptick in e-commerce, and folks still need to rely on receiving goods. And when you think about supply chains, I think what's changed is, for me at least, what I've observed is that last mile experience can often define the customer experience. So when you look at core experience upstream, that's great. But if you can't actually deliver the promise downstream, you're not doing well. When it comes to manufacturing specifically, I see a lot of change in business models, so direct to consumer models. And when you think about the evolving role of retail operations, the evolving role of the store and how they're being used in micro fulfillment and distribution centers now, a lot of that's changed when you look at enabling BOPIS or curbside, and it's a new world. I mean, I don't think that any of us thought that folks were going to be able to pivot to 90% e-com or omni-channel like in 12 months. And the reality is, if you don't, you'll probably be left behind. The other thing that's changed, and this is something that I also work on at IBM, is the promise of green retail supply chains or green omni-channel. And that's when you're able to actually take a lot of that rich data that happens for product proof and credibility. So you have folks who prioritize sustainability, and they want to know, is this product compostable? Is it recyclable? Was there child labor involved? All of the things that I think, especially me as a mother, when I buy a product, I want to know that I'm not contributing to defectors and people who don't model the same values that I model. So the whole concept of what manufacturers have to prove, not only in how they produce goods, but also that end-to-end product proof. It's changing, and it's very, very impactful because customers want to know. They're leading with their values. They're buying with their values. So those are probably the biggest shifts that I see right now in omnichannel.
Yeah.
Wow, and that's powerful. And we have a number of folks. So we work with a lot of the manufacturing extension partnerships. Our dear friend Alyssa up in Alaska, she's the director at the. You would love Alyssa.
Hi, Alyssa.
She is Dr. Alyssa. So we're huge proponents for made in USA products. We're seeing a lot of shift of wanting to be manufacturing back. Our dear friend Paul in New Jersey they have a great Twitter chat group. It's USA Manufacturing. They go live every Thursday. Are you starting to see any reshoring? Are you seeing any products coming back in the supply chain?
Sure. I mean, I think that when you talk about supply chains through the lens of sustainability, risk is a huge conversation. Mm-hmm. And typically shorter supply chains are happier supply chains. Yeah. When you start to think about the promise of hyper localism, that you're able to reach SMBs, you're able to have a more diverse supply base, and you're able to directly contribute to resilient communities and economic growth that marry the communities you serve. So that it's sort of, I think a lot of it's changing, and typically people were competing on cost, where now it's risk competitiveness. And when you have shorter supply chains and you look at nearshoring or, shorter supply chains in general, often what happens is that you do have more autonomy. You do have reduced latency and time to respond proactively when there's disruption. And I think you also have a lot more control, and there's an awareness. I personally love when people source locally. My father was a small business owner. My husband is as well. And there's real value in knowing, that you're meaningfully contributing to a community that really needs it. Right. So I think it's definitely not a trend. I think we're going to see more of it. Again, I mentioned people are leading with their values. And this is something, when you think about the emergence of the LOHAS and the Naturalites, these are U.S. consumer segments. They represent about 45% of the buying population. They want to buy local. Right. They want to know where that conduit and connection is. This is how my dollar's being spent and how it's adding value to the world.
Mm-hmm. Man, what a phenomenal trend. And when you look for, we use that word silver linings that have come out of COVID. There are just so many positive things as far as new opportunities for our manufacturing base in the U.S. Now, Sheri, you're really a champion and advocate for change, innovation. See, when you're working with folks, manufacturers, a lot of us, us older dudes, me and Damon, right? Damon, us, we're resistant to change. When you're working with, and I feel like, you're just a driving force just to kind of plow through that change. When how do you work with folks as far as maybe they're a little bit resistant to change? How do you tackle those challenges?
Yeah, so that's a great question because, I come from industry. I'm not a legacy consultant. I have a manufacturing background and certainly have been through tons of business transformation. And I think that what people miss is how you approach the very human experience in some of these technological process shifts. And if you're looking for the secret recipe, I have a point of view. I think leading with purpose helps. Leveraging the power of piloting, making it real, and then also creating a safe space for change and addressing social risks. And I'll talk a little bit about that just to give you some tips and lessons, hard-earned lessons, if you will. People like certainty. And I think that a lot of what happens is this assumption that change equals instability and risk. So you really have to create an environment that's stable and an environment where everyone can thrive. So when you think about leading with purpose and clearly defining why through things like vision, governance, connecting the dots for individuals in a day in the life transition, that really helps frame and shape those underlying values and attitudes and ongoing motivation that you need during scale. I think also piloting. People don't understand that early sense making, the learning agility, working out the kinks, so to speak, if you will, before scale, it removes a lot of risk around change and technology shifts that you need for alignment. And the feasibility, the reliable forecasts and value and understanding those levers, really, really important. And then lastly, this is the $1 million to $10 billion advice. It's critical you address social risks, and you have to create safe spaces. We hear a lot about some of the learnings at Google and also at IBM around psychological safety. And what happens is when people feel safe, bringing their whole selves to work, raising their hands, openly sharing how they feel, it ultimately reduces the emotional labor of transformation. And we all know what that feels like. It's that change where at the end of the day, you're just like, oh gosh, it's just so much to bear. Right. Those are all the feelings associated with risk and perception of risk. Right. So that's my secret recipe, for tipping the scale and creating lasting change. Leading with purpose, safe space for change, addressing those social risks, and then also leveraging the power of piloting.
Wow, man, that was so powerful. I love that, the safe space for change. I've never heard it framed like that. And I know, and you have a great podcast, guys. If check out Sheri's podcast, the supply chain revolution. She's spearing up supply chain rebels, and you go heavy into sustainability, diversity, all these topics. I know you have a great feature coming out in was it Supply Chain Digital next month? Is that correct?
Yes, the May cover, which is pretty cool.
Congratulations. Can you not to give away the we want everybody to read that article. Can you share a little bit about what was covered in there?
Sure, I can. So it's all about diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice. And I'm a big believer that, businesses cannot succeed in society when communities are failing. And when you think about, what sustainability means, it's obviously about new emerging business models, but it's also about transforming the lives of people. And I talk a little bit about that through inequities. We don't have to look far with what's happened during COVID and climate change. And what you find is that marginalized populations, when they go through this sort of disruption, they're often hit the hardest. And it shines a light on a lot of issues that we need to address, including inequity. So, in terms of what's specifically covered, I think I talk a little bit about my journey. I'm a first generation college student. Neither one of my parents went to school. I grew up poor. I didn't know that supply chain was a career option for me. Right. I didn't know anyone in a supply chain. I didn't know how to go to college or what that process looked like. Right. And the premise is that there are a lot of talented people, but they don't have access. So how do we create that access? And I talk a little bit about IBM's work with historically Black colleges and universities. I started my career at an HBCU in academia, and it was truly transformational because it taught me how to challenge the status quo, how to understand that revolution and disruption are critical to moving forward and progressing our society in a meaningful way. So that we talk a lot about that. We talk about how hard it is for women. 5 million women have left the workforce. And despite what people tell you, things have gone backwards about 20, 25 years because of COVID. We have to do better. We have to make it a priority. We have to create an environment where folks can show up and, hey, they don't have a traditional work day. You work from here and you work when you're most productive. And all of those changes need to happen so we have equity in the workplace and in supply chain.
Wow. I tell you, you're such an inspiration. I know we both have daughters, and I talked about, I love what I love about our program, Damon. We bring on these just inspirational women, and they're paving paths of new careers. And Dr. Alyssa says, preach, Sheri, preach, man. So what I want to get into, you claim and and DC just joined us, Sheri. So DC just chimed in.
Hello, darling.
So you as a bold feminist, what advice do you have for small manufacturers that are working on themselves as far as creating that diverse and working environment? What are tips, strategies? How do you advise those folks?
Yeah, it's really hard, I think, when you get started, because the first thing is you actually have to start measuring and getting real on holding yourself accountable. And I think that that's a place of vulnerability that a lot of organizations don't necessarily feel comfortable with sharing, but it's important because you have to be able to visualize where those blind spots are, and also opportunities for training, upskilling, dealing with some of those microaggressions. If you're not measuring it, there's a reluctancy to really move forward, and people typically fall back into those natural patterns of behavior. So set goals, hold yourself accountable, talk to people. I mean, if you're talking about small manufacturing environments, typically they're very small teams.
Right.
And you're working together a lot. Maybe you spend more time with your coworkers than you spend with your spouse or folks at home. So communication is key. And I think also, shared language is important. So people typically carry a lot of things that they've learned. Pronouns, there's a lot. There's just these ingrained behaviors that we kind of have to work on ourselves. And it starts with an individual commitment. For diversity, for finding purpose and being happy in life. It's not your employer's responsibility. It's not your friends, your family. It's yours. You wake up and define your day. Yeah. And you also wake up and define whether or not you want to be committed to an equitable and safe workspace.
Yeah.
Wow. So, Damon, we're just getting a small taste, and, no wonder, Sheri's winning awards. You got, year after year on these topics. And Sheri, and I know you have a hard stop at the top of the hour, and this is flown by quickly. Can you share? So what are you seeing for, every manufacturer is just struggling with supply chain right now, parts, folks that are making circuit boards can't get chips and certain parts. What are some paradigm shifts, or what are you seeing or predicting for 2021?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, I think the supply chain function has changed, and COVID has certainly accelerated digital. And we talked a little bit about that with omnichannel, but it's also this convergence of tech, supplier and network risk management, having the ability to really understand that demand and supply matching, but then beyond that, the orchestration, the visibility end to end. I think that these are all very real shifts for 2021 and beyond. The other thing that a lot of people don't talk about, because there's been such an overwhelming uptick in digital adoption, is in the next 3 years, 120 million workers may have to be retrained or reskilled as a result of intelligent automation and AI. And that's only been exacerbated in the midst of the pandemic. So you have people accelerating to digital, but there's still a skills gap. The other big shift is, like I mentioned before, moving away from cost competitiveness to risk competitiveness. And I think that what you both mentioned earlier, there's a sea change where folks are thinking global, but acting local. And that is rebalancing risk. And that is having the ability to connect operational excellence and sustainability, driving real measurable progress. So if you're in supply chain right now, this is the best time to be in supply chain. We're no longer cost centers. I have news. We're foundational to growth and delivering new value that really forms the basis of trust and transparency and responsibility for brands and for manufacturers. We're literally powering the world.
Right. So much opportunity. You've covered so much in such a short period of time for e-commerce, manufacturers with an opportunity to go direct to end user, direct to consumer, taking on customer service challenges, handling that diversity. There's just so much to cover there. And again, want to be respectful of your time. I know you have a hard stop. So question that we love to ask our guests each week. This is the last question that I'd like to ask. Our dear friend, her name is Allison DeFord. She preaches, how do you make your customer the hero of your story? So my question to you, Sheri, is, and I think you've covered a ton of it today in the past 25 minutes, how do you make your customer the hero of your story?
I mean, people say that you have to put the customer first, and everyone wants to be customer centric. You have to actually ask them and have them represented, I think, very early on upstream in product design, in offering, making sure that the way that you measure value and the way that you deliver value captures voice of the customer. But then before that, I think you have to get the employee experience right, because if you get that right, then the customer experience follows. And this really involves a human-centered approach. That's what is at the heart of both of these. If they overlap in a Venn diagram, getting really clear on the human-centered approach. And I know that a lot of technologists believe that supply chains are run on laptops, but they're not. They're still very physical. And because of that physical nature, we really have to tune into voice of the customer, leading with empathy, understanding the value of values and how that drives customer experience, and also the employees that stand up your supply chains globally.
Yep. Awesome.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I'm like speechless right now,
Yeah,
Sheri.
yeah.
So just to recap, guys, listen, safe space for change. Leading with empathy, emotional labor, human-centered companies, human-centered products. People do business with people. They don't do business with businesses. So and even this is coming from IBM. So this is what a gem. Again, Sheri, I want to be mindful. We're right at the top of the hour now. Any parting thoughts? I know you've got this great feature coming out in supply chain digital. You have a bunch of speaking engagements coming up. Anything that you want to share? And I've dropped Sheri's LinkedIn profile, and you have to check out her website, her podcast. Anything that you want to share to close us out with, Sheri?
I'm just so thrilled to be here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Let's connect on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. I have tons of events coming up. It's free learning, Panasonic, SAP Sapphire, IBM's Think Conference, super cool events, and I would love to see you there.
Guys, right. if you need a speaker in supply chain, you just heard it here. So Eric, thank you for joining us. DC, guy, Kimberly, everyone, Alyssa, Bobby, Leo, thank you guys, Val, AJ, appreciate every single one of you. Sheri, thank you from the bottom of my heart, man. I've been looking forward to this for months, so thank you for taking time. I know you're super busy. Really appreciate this.
Thank you. I'm going to hit the clap here. Can everyone see? I'm clapping. Yeah. Thank you
so much. Thanks, everyone. I want to be really respectful of your time, Sheri. I'm going to drop us off of LinkedIn Live. And if anyone's listening there on LinkedIn Live, yes, you can review this on my profile, Damon Pistolka. It's under my post. Go ahead and listen to Sheri again. As she said, reach out, connect with her on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and Instagram, and go from there. But thank you so much. And we're going to go back to the tables on Remo. We're stopping on LinkedIn. And
hey, Damon, one thing real quick. I want to remind everybody. So we're doing an e-commerce workshop series at Temple University. It's running every Tuesday for the next 6 Tuesdays. Temple University. So check out the Temple University Small Business Development Center. Yep. I'm doing an e-commerce workshop with the Impact Washington, the MEP of Washington, on this Tuesday. If you guys come back to the tables, I'll get that link to you guys. So again, thank you, Sheri. Appreciate you. Appreciate everybody. Have a great weekend.
Yep. Thanks a lot, everyone. Going back to the tables now.